"Son, happy birthday, this is for you." I opened it. It was an invoice. Cost of raising you from birth to 18. $204,527.16. Payment due upon receipt. Payment plans available. There was even a watermark. This man printed it on company letterhead. Like I was a client. I laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was so aggressively him. So soul-numbingly on-brand that for a moment I genuinely thought it was satire. A joke. Some weird, welcome to adulthood, gag. But then he looked at me, dead serious, and said, "It's time you understood the value of $1, Aaron. You've been coasting. This'll give you some perspective. Let me rewind. Fast. No fluff. I'm Aaron. Just turned 18. Finished high school early. Got a scholarship lined up for computer science. I fix tech junk on the side for extra cash. I'm not rich, but I'm not clueless. I know my worth. And up until this moment, I thought I knew his. My dad's name is Mark. Financial consultant. King of spreadsheets. Man wears a watch more expensive than my entire tuition and treats people like entries in his mental QuickBooks. When I was 5, he gave me a piggy bank labeled debt management. When I was 10, he told me Santa was a tax write-off. And when I was 12 and asked if he was proud of me, he said, "Pride is for people who settle." So yeah, we're not exactly the hug-it-out type. When my mom left, I stayed. Not because I wanted to, but because she said, "You're stronger than he is. He needs someone who won't break." I didn't know what that meant until years later. But I stayed. And now, on my 18th birthday, after surviving 18 years of passive-aggressive silence, conditional approval, and corporate-level parenting, I was being handed a bill. And let me tell you, he was proud of it. "Look," he said, sipping his protein shake, "it's all there. Housing, food, clothing, medical, extracurriculars. I even gave you a discount on emotional labor." He laughed. I didn't. I asked him if he was serious. He said, "Dead serious. You're a man now. Time to contribute." I asked what would happen if I didn't pay it. He shrugged. "Then I'll know what kind of man you really are." That hit harder than I'd like to admit. It wasn't just a number. It was a threat. A line in the sand. An ultimatum. So I stood up, walked to my room, and pulled out my envelope. The one I'd been building for a year. The one with my numbers. My receipts. I walked back into the kitchen, slapped it on the table, and said, "You wanna talk ROI? Here's mine." Because while he was tracking grocery receipts and light bills, I was tracking every single thing he failed to do. Every missed game. Every skipped parent-teacher meeting. Every night I ate alone. Every birthday card that came with a lecture instead of love. I itemized the costs of raising myself emotionally. $0 for comfort after mom left. $0 for showing up when I won the coding competition. $0 for listening, really listening, when I said I was depressed. $0 for being a father, not just a provider. Subtotal, everything I needed. Amount paid, nothing. "You raised a kid," I said. "But I raised a man." He blinked. He didn't expect me to fight back. He expected me to fold. To say sorry. To say thank you. Instead, I left the invoice. Walked out the front door. And haven't looked back since. Oh, and that $204,527.16. I paid it. In a way he'll never forget. He laughed when he saw the envelope. Thought it was a joke. Until he flipped the first page and saw the words, "Notice of legal action." His smirk? Gone. I'll be honest, I didn't think I'd go this far. But when someone tries to reduce your entire existence to a six-figure expense report, you start thinking differently. Let me rewind about 6 months. I was still 17. Still, under his roof, as he loved to say. But I wasn't some clueless kid. I had a plan. I had been working on it in silence, brick by brick. You see, Dad thought he was the only one playing chess. But I was building the board. I had a part-time job fixing busted laptops, sure. But what he didn't know was that I was also freelancing online, debugging code, optimizing websites, flipping forgotten domains. I didn't post about it. Didn't brag. Just saved. Every dollar. And I wasn't just hoarding cash, I was building an exit strategy. I opened a separate checking account he couldn't track. Got a P.O. box across town. Saved screenshots of every weird email he sent, including one where he joked that I owed him back pay for wear and tear on the carpet. He was the kind of guy who'd put "sighing too loud" on a time sheet if he could. So I started tracking everything he didn't do. The neglect. The verbal digs. The emotional drive-bys. And when I realized I had a solid file, I booked a free consultation with a lawyer. It was just supposed to be a one-off thing. Do I have a case meeting? Turns out, I might have had two. Now let's fast forward to the day after my birthday, the day after the invoice. Dad was already acting like I owed him rent. Walked into the kitchen, saw me eating cereal, and said, "Clock's ticking, Aaron. Don't make me add late fees." I didn't even flinch. Just pushed my envelope across the table. He opened it. Read the first page. His jaw actually dropped, and this is a man who once told me emotions are for people who can't afford lawyers. The paper said, "Intent to pursue emancipation backdated to age 16, citing parental neglect, emotional abandonment, and financial coercion." It wasn't a lawsuit, not yet. It was a warning shot. Legally valid. Professionally formatted. Signed and sealed by the attorney I'd hired with my freelance savings. But the best part? It came with a counter-invoice. Yep. I sent him a bill, too. Mine listed things like unpaid emotional support hours, cost of self-taught therapy and mental health apps, compounded interest on independence, loss of childhood security, total due, $0. Because I don't want his money. I want him to know he doesn't own me anymore. He didn't say anything. Just sat there, breathing through his nose like a kettle about to boil. "You think this scares me?" he finally asked. "No," I said. "But it should embarrass you." He stood up, said I was being dramatic, and stormed out of the kitchen. An hour later, I got a notification on my phone. He transferred exactly $1 to my account. Memo line? "Here's your refund." That's when I knew he hadn't learned a damn thing. So I did the only thing left to do. I walked away. I packed what I needed. Left behind the rest. Took my laptop, my backup drive, and the copy of the invoice I framed and hung above my desk, not because I'm proud of it, but because I never want to forget what it cost me to become my own person. I didn't leave in anger. I left with clarity. And I didn't just walk out of that house, I walked out of his story. The one where he was the hero and I was just some ungrateful side character. Not anymore. But if you think this ends here, buckle up. Because 2 weeks later, I found out he'd sent copies of the invoice to my college's financial aid office. And that's when I stopped playing defense. I got the email at 6:12 a.m. Subject line. Urgent, tuition aid review, possible parental obligation. I didn't even need to open it. I already knew. He actually did it. He sent the invoice to my university. Let me paint you the full insanity of what happened. I moved out after the whole birthday invoice debacle. Took my laptop, my savings, and a silent vow that I was done with my father's games. He thought it was just teenage rebellion. He didn't realize I was 18 with leverage. Everything was going fine. My college had awarded me a need-based aid package, thanks to my documented lack of support at home. I'd worked my butt off for it. GPA? Clean. FAFSA? Honest. Financial documentation? Flawless. Until he decided to drop a grenade. Somehow, and I still don't know how he even thought this made sense, he sent my college financial office a package, complete with the same invoice from my birthday. Cover letter included. In it, he claimed, "My son has misrepresented his financial independence. I have supported him to the amount of $204,527.16, and therefore, he should not qualify for need-based assistance." He attached tax returns, bank statements, even a screenshot of a text I sent him 2 years ago thanking him for buying me a backpack. Petty doesn't even begin to describe it. He didn't want money. He wanted to control the narrative. So here's what I did. I took a breath. Drank some water. And then I drafted the coldest, cleanest, most professionally savage email of my life. I attached every bit of evidence I had. Proof that I'd been financially independent for over a year. The signed legal notice I gave him. Statements from my attorney. Screenshots of texts he sent threatening to make college harder than it has to be. And yes, his original birthday invoice. Then I called the financial aid office directly. Explained everything. Calm. Measured. Honest. The woman on the phone? Her name was Kelsey. And let me tell you, Kelsey has been through some family drama herself, because when she saw the part of the invoice where he tried to charge me for emotional labor, she muttered, "What the actual hell?" She flagged the claim as harassment, attached my statement to the case file, and assured me I was in no danger of losing aid. Crisis averted. But I wasn't done. Because in his letter, my dad made one fatal mistake. He signed it with his company email address. Now, I want to be clear, I wasn't trying to ruin his life. I just wanted to return the favor, let his boss see what kind of financial strategist thought it was good business to invoice his kid and weaponize paperwork out of spite. So I wrote a very polite email to his firm's HR department. It wasn't angry. It wasn't aggressive. It was informative. I attached a redacted version of the invoice and the letter he sent to my school. I explained, carefully, that this had interfered with my education and that his professional title had been used in what amounted to a personal vendetta against a legal adult. I didn't even ask for action. I just asked, "Is this normal practice at your firm?" That same evening, I got a message from a blocked number. "You crossed a line." It was him. But guess what? So did he. I didn't respond. 2 days later, I heard from a family friend, apparently, Dad was asked to take a leave of absence while the company reviewed his behavior. They called it reputational concerns. Let me be crystal clear. I didn't get him fired. He did that when he chose to weaponize parenthood like a petty tyrant. Me? I just turned the mirror around. But this man wasn't done. Because just when I thought it was finally over, I got a knock on my apartment door. It was a process server. My dad was suing me for contractual fraud. Yeah. He actually tried to enforce the birthday invoice in court. The process server didn't even flinch. He held the manila envelope like it weighed nothing and said, "Aaron? You've been served." I opened it right there in my apartment doorway, barefoot and holding a mug of half-warmed instant coffee. Summons to small claims court. Filed by none other than my father, Mark. The charge? Breach of verbal contract. Let me say that again, just so we're clear, my dad was suing me for not paying an imaginary invoice he gave me for my 18th birthday. Now, I've been blindsided before. Like the time I found out my mom was leaving, or the time I came home from school and all my stuff had been rearranged into plastic bins because visual clutter impacts productivity. But this? This was nuclear-grade pettiness. He claimed that by accepting the envelope, and saying, "Thanks," I had agreed to repay him. He cited contract law. Intent to enter a binding agreement. Implied acceptance of terms. I couldn't even process it. Not because it was overwhelming, but because it was so unbelievably stupid. The man really thought a court would side with him because I opened a birthday card and didn't immediately hire a legal team. I called my attorney, yes, I still had him on retainer, thank you very much, and he nearly spit out his coffee when I read him the claim. "This is either genius or pathetic," he said. "Actually, it's both." We filed a response. Requested discovery. And I started preparing like I was defending a doctoral thesis. Not because I was afraid of losing. But because I wanted to win loudly. Fast forward 2 weeks. I walk into the courtroom wearing a blazer I bought for $17 at a thrift store and tailored myself with YouTube tutorials. My dad's already seated. Full suit. Tie. Hair slicked back like he's auditioning for a corporate villain role. He wouldn't even look at me. The judge, middle-aged, glasses, clearly already tired of this nonsense, calls the case. Mark versus Aaron. My dad opens with a speech. Of course. Talks about principles, parental investment, and the breakdown of mutual respect. You'd think I'd burn down his retirement home. He says I accepted the invoice, made no effort to dispute the terms, and therefore legally agreed to repay the debt of my upbringing. I wish I was exaggerating. Then it was my turn. I stood up. No theatrics. Just facts. Your Honor, I said, this case is not about breach of contract. It's about a parent trying to retroactively charge their child for existing. I handed over Exhibit A, the original birthday invoice, complete with typos, sarcasm, and a line that literally said, "Emotional labor, discounted." Then I dropped Exhibit B, a sworn statement from my high school counselor confirming years of financial neglect, emotional absenteeism, and even a referral to a youth mental health program I enrolled in without parental involvement. Exhibit C? Text messages. Voicemails. A screenshot where my dad literally wrote, "You're lucky I didn't charge interest for the teenage years." The judge raised an eyebrow. That was a win. Then came the moment I'd been waiting for. My attorney leaned over and whispered, "Want to question him yourself?" I nodded. And in front of the whole courtroom, I cross-examined my father. "Mr. Last name," I said, "at what age did I begin paying for my own clothing?" 16, he muttered. "And did I ever ask to be born?" "Objection," he snapped. "Sustained," the judge said, but smiled a little. "Did you ever inform me, verbally or in writing, that opening the envelope would bind me to a financial obligation?" "No, but..." No further questions. We rested our case. The judge asked a few questions, then called for a brief recess. 10 minutes later, we were back. Judgment, in my favor. The judge said, and I quote, "There is no legal precedent for charging one's child for their own upbringing. Mr. Johnson, this is not a contract. This is a birthday card turned into a vendetta. Case dismissed." But that wasn't the best part. Because as we stood to leave, the judge added, "And frankly, if anyone deserves compensation here, it's your son." My dad stormed out without a word. Me? I walked out smiling, $17 blazer and all. But 2 days later, I got an email from his firm. They wanted to meet. Turns out, word had gotten out. "Is this Aaron Johnson?" "Yes. This is Melissa from Weston and Bell. We'd like to speak with you, in person, if possible, regarding a recent legal filing your father submitted using our company letterhead." Boom. Right there, standing in the middle of a laundromat, holding a basket of socks and betrayal, I realized this man's career was about to unravel. If you've been following, you already know the backstory. My dad tried to sue me for not paying a $204,527 invoice he gave me for my birthday, a bill for raising me, basically. He brought it to court. I brought receipts. I won. But he didn't just sue me, he signed every official document with his company email and job title printed on top like it was his business card. Rookie move, Dad. You want to use your job to flex power? Cool. Just don't be shocked when your job calls me. Melissa was polite, surgical, even. I agreed to the meeting, mostly because I was curious. I didn't want to burn the man's life down, but he'd practically doused himself in gasoline and handed me the matches. So 2 days later, I walked into a sleek office building downtown. Polished marble floors. Receptionist with a headset. Water cooler that looked more expensive than my car. The woman who greeted me? Early 40s. Blazer sharp enough to file paperwork on. "Thank you for coming, Aaron. We're conducting an internal ethics review. We'd just like to confirm a few details." I nodded. She asked for clarification on the lawsuit, mainly, whether the documents I submitted in court were accurate. I confirmed. Then she slid a paper across the table, my dad's original cover letter to my college, with the Weston and Bell logo plastered across the top. It included phrases like, "As a senior financial consultant, I understand the burden of fraudulent dependency claims." He'd essentially used his job title to imply authority, like some sort of economic Jedi master. Only problem? He didn't have authorization to send that letter on the firm's behalf. Big mistake. Melissa thanked me. Told me they'd be following up after their review. I left thinking that would be it. It wasn't. A week later, my dad called me, for the first time since court. He didn't yell. He didn't demand. He just said, "You got me suspended." I didn't respond. Because no, Dad. You got yourself suspended. I later found out he was put on indefinite leave. The firm cited misuse of company branding, ethical conflicts, and reputational risk. Apparently, one of their longtime clients even pulled out after seeing a post about the lawsuit on Reddit. Yeah, someone posted the court transcript. It went low-key viral. I didn't laugh. Not really. But I did feel something. Not revenge. Not victory. Just closure. Because for once, he couldn't spin the story. Couldn't gaslight. Couldn't invoice his way out of accountability. The world finally saw him the way I always had. But here's the kicker. As he was suspended, and my story was spreading, I got a message. From my mom. After 8 years of silence. And what she said changed everything. I saw what your father did, and I think it's time you knew the full story. That was the first message I got from her in 8 years. No, hi. No, how are you? Just a voice memo that started like a Netflix docuseries and hit like a punch to the gut. Here's the thing. I hadn't heard from my mom since I was 10. One day, she was there, cooking spaghetti, dancing to Fleetwood Mac, humming off-key while folding laundry. The next day, she was just gone. No goodbye. No letter. No explanation. Dad told me she needed space and was working through some things. That became the official family script. Over time, I stopped asking. Stopped hoping. Built a numb little corner in my brain where she used to be. But after my dad tried suing me, and the internet got a hold of the court transcript, apparently, she saw it too. And for the first time in almost a decade, she reached out. Her first message was short. But the second one? 10 minutes long. Voice shaky, but clear. I left because of him, Aaron. I wanted to take you with me, but I was scared he'd use everything he had to destroy me. And he almost did. She wasn't being dramatic. Turns out, before she left, she did try to fight for custody. She tried twice. But according to her, Dad had connections. Money. A legal team ready to twist her anxiety into instability. She said he made her out to be an unfit parent, even fabricated financial records to suggest she was a risk. She lost. Twice. I thought staying close would be worse for you than staying away, she said. So I disappeared. But I never stopped watching. Or waiting. She sent me screenshots, emails she'd drafted and never sent. Photos she saved from my school's website. Even copies of letters she wrote on my birthdays but never mailed. It broke something in me I didn't realize was still fragile. Because for years, I thought she left because I wasn't enough. Not smart enough. Not lovable enough. Not worth staying for. Turns out, she left because she couldn't win. And now, after all this time, she was reaching out because she thought maybe, just maybe, I'd understand. I didn't respond right away. I listened to her voice. Over and over. Then I stared at the blinking cursor on my phone for 2 hours straight. Then, finally, I wrote. I want to know everything. We started texting. Then we called. The first phone call lasted 3 hours. We laughed. Cried. Filled in the missing pages. She told me that the birthday invoice was peak Mark behavior. That he used to joke about billing her for every dinner date he paid for before they were married. He used guilt as currency, she said. And he's always wanted control more than connection. That's when I asked the question I'd been avoiding. Did he ever do anything worse? Silence. Then. Yes. She didn't get into all of it. Not yet. But she told me there were documents. Emails. Financial records. Stuff she'd kept in a locked box, waiting for the right time. I didn't think I'd ever need them again, she said. But after what he did to you, I think it's time. That time would come sooner than either of us expected. Because the very next day, Dad called me. For the first time since losing the case. And what he said shook me harder than the lawsuit ever could. Aaron, we need to talk. Face to face. That's how the call started. No hello. No apology. No trace of the smug, suit-wrapped tyrant who handed me a bill for my own childhood. Just desperation. I hadn't spoken to him since court. He tried suing me over a birthday invoice. Tried sabotaging my college aid. Tried dragging my name through the mud using his own company's letterhead. And he lost. Hard. The lawsuit got tossed. His firm suspended him. And for the first time in my life, the man who built his image like a fortress of spreadsheets and control was crumbling. So yeah, when my phone lit up with Dad, mobile, I nearly let it ring out. But curiosity? It's a curse. I answered. He asked to meet. Said it was urgent. Said it wasn't about the past. Which, coming from him, meant it absolutely was. So, I agreed. We met at the same soulless cafe where he used to force me to study for SATs over bitter espresso and lectures about ROI. And when I walked in, he looked smaller. Not physically, but deflated. Like his shadow didn't stretch as far as it used to. He got straight to it. I need someone to take over the business. Temporarily. Until the board clears this thing up. I blinked. Thought maybe I misheard him. You want me to take over your company? He nodded. Technically, you're old enough. You're sharp. You've been working, right? Freelancing? He said it like he just discovered I could tie my own shoes. The optics look better if it stays in the family. There it was. Not a gesture of trust. Not some long-awaited father-son bridge-building moment. Just optics. He was losing control. And I? I was his cleanup crew. But here's the twist. I said yes. Yeah. You weren't expecting that, were you? Neither was he. I smiled. Told him I'd need to review some documents first. Maybe shadow the process. Learn the ropes. He bought it. Because even after all this, he still thought I wanted to be him. What he didn't know? I had no intention of saving his reputation. I wanted access. That same night, I called my mom. Told her about the offer. Her voice cracked. Aaron, if you go through his files, you might find something I couldn't. Like what? Proof of what he did. Before I left. To me. To people he worked with. To cover it all up. She never said exactly what it was. Only that it was the reason she ran, instead of fighting harder to stay. And now? I had the key to his empire. And possibly, the proof that would burn it all down. So yeah. I agreed to help. For now. But while he thought I was there to protect his name, I was building the case that could end it. Access denied. Admin only. That's what the screen said the first time I tried to open the folder. So I waited. Waited until he stepped away for a call. Waited until he left his laptop unlocked, because of course he did, and all that digital arrogance finally worked in my favor. I clicked the folder again. This time, it opened. The folder was buried deep, not on the company server, not on his desktop. It was hidden inside a subfolder labeled Q4 Projections, nested beneath 3 dummy spreadsheets. The name of the real file? Confidential, DH. My mom's initials. The first doc was a scanned letter, legal letterhead, dated years ago. From a law firm I didn't recognize. It was a formal cease and desist. Not addressed to my dad. Addressed from him. To my mom. It accused her of slander, demanded silence, threatened legal action if she ever spoke about the incident. My chest tightened. The next file was a transcript. An interview, internal, recorded during a company HR probe over a decade ago. My mom's name was all over it. So was someone else's. Her old coworker. Female. Mid-level analyst. Allegations of misconduct. Coercion. My dad's name in bold. And this line, in her statement. When she confronted him about it, she was forced out too. She. My mother. She didn't leave because she was scared of losing custody. She left because she was threatened. Silenced. Buried under NDAs and corporate handshakes. And this folder? It was the proof. My dad used the same tactics on her that he tried to use on me, just in a suit, with legal templates and that creepy calm voice he always saved for when he wanted something most. Except this time, the paper trail didn't go away. He hid it. Digitally, sure, but it was still there. And now? So was I. I copied everything to an encrypted drive. Then I called my mom. No intro. No hesitation. I found it. She went quiet. Just breathed. And then she said, "We have enough now." We started planning. Quietly. Carefully. I wasn't going to ruin his life out of revenge. But if he tried to crawl back into power, rebuild his fake empire, rewrite the story again, we'd be ready. But before that, there was one more thing. A file labeled Trust, Aaron. It was a PDF. 32 pages. Legal documentation for a trust fund. Apparently, my dad had been stashing money away for me since I was born. Roughly $250,000, untouched. But there was a catch. Access granted upon completion of financial reconciliation. AKA, I had to pay him back first. The invoice. It all circled back. But this time? I had leverage. And if he thought I'd stay quiet just for a trust fund he dangled like a carrot, he was about to get the rudest awakening of his life. I know everything. That's all I said. 7 words. Calm. Measured. Unshakable. And for the first time in my entire life, he flinched. We were sitting in his office, same one where he'd handed me that absurd invoice, same one where he'd told me I owed him 6 figures for having the audacity to exist. Only now, the power had shifted. I didn't slam anything down. I didn't raise my voice. I just reached into my backpack, pulled out the flash drive, placed it on his desk, and said those 7 words. I know everything. And now, so does she. His fingers twitched. His jaw clenched. He didn't pick up the drive. He didn't have to. He knew. I could see it in his eyes. For once, the man who always knew what to say, who could manipulate any room with a smirk and a spreadsheet, was speechless. He tried to recover. You don't understand what you're getting involved in, Aaron. I didn't blink. No. You don't understand. I'm not your son right now. I'm the one holding the files. He stood up. Paced. Your mother, she left. She gave up. She has no credibility. I leaned in. You forged documents to make sure no one believed her. You buried harassment claims. You bullied her out of your life and tried to make me believe she just walked away. His mouth opened. Closed. No words came out. You built a legacy on silence, I said. And now it's starting to talk. I told him I wasn't going to the press. Not yet. But I also wasn't letting this sit quietly in some corner of a drive anymore. I'd already spoken to 2 lawyers, one for Mom, one for the woman whose name was in the file. Both were ready. One phone call, and this whole thing turns public. But I gave him a choice. You want me gone? Fine. Dissolve the trust. Donate it. Set it on fire. I don't want your money. I want your name off my back. Sign it over. I walk away. Quietly. Or. I walk straight to the board. He sat down. Hard. No power pose. No snark. No twisted smile. Just silence. Then, the smallest voice I'd ever heard from him. You think this makes you strong? I stood. No. Living in your shadow all these years without disappearing completely, that made me strong. I left the drive on his desk and walked out. No big speech. No dramatic look back. I didn't need him to beg or confess. I needed him to feel the weight of someone who finally stopped playing by his rules. That night, I got a message from Mom. 1 sentence. I'm proud of you. I'd been waiting my whole life to hear that. And then, 2 days later, an email from his assistant hit my inbox. Subject, termination agreement. Per your request, the trust has been dissolved. All future contact is to be routed through legal counsel. He chose silence. Good. Now he can live in the world he created. Where money speaks louder than people. But then came the final twist. The woman in that old HR report? She reached out. And she had her own story to tell. One that might bring everything crashing down. For good. I've been waiting for someone like you, Aaron. That's what she said when we met. The woman whose name was buried in my dad's hidden HR folder. The one they labeled a disgruntled former employee. The one my mom tried to defend, before she got steamrolled. Her name was Marlene. She didn't look like a victim. She looked like someone who survived. We met at a little coffee shop outside the city, her pick, her turf. She came prepared. Binder in hand. Letters. Emails. Timeline. Copies of the NDA she was bullied into signing. And the one thing she'd been holding onto like a final chess piece. A recording. She'd never played it for anyone before. She said she kept it as insurance, in case she ever got dragged back into his orbit. And now? She was ready to cash it in. The recording started with casual small talk. Office chatter. Background sounds of a break room. Then his voice. My dad. Crystal clear. Bragging. You want to make it in this company? Then don't cry harassment just because you didn't get promoted. Marlene's voice, trying to stay calm. Mark, that's not what this is. What you said to me in your office was misunderstood. Or misremembered. Or never happened. Pick whichever version helps you sleep. The tone in his voice? Cold. Slick. Trained. Do yourself a favor and forget this conversation. Marlene paused the audio. Looked at me. That's the man your mom tried to fight. The man who made me disappear. And now, we make him disappear. She'd been holding back all these years, thinking maybe justice wasn't possible. But now that I had confirmed what she always knew, she was done being quiet. She didn't want money. She didn't want revenge. She wanted accountability. So we contacted a journalist. Not a tabloid type, a real investigative reporter who specialized in corporate misconduct. I handed over the HR files. Marlene gave the interview. My mom joined her, anonymously, to corroborate the timeline. And when the story dropped, it exploded. Front page. 3 million views in 48 hours. The firm issued a statement by noon. Effective immediately, Mark, last name, has been terminated from Weston and Bell. They stripped his title. Deleted his bio. His LinkedIn went dark. The emails stopped. His entire legacy evaporated. People always say the truth sets you free. But sometimes, it just makes other people finally see what you've carried your whole life. I never spoke to him again. Not after the lawsuit. Not after the files. Not after the article. And I never will. But here's the last thing I'll say. Remember the invoice? The one for $204,527.16. I printed it. Folded it. And mailed it back to him. With one sentence written across the top in red ink. Paid in full.